All right, guys, in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a basic Photoshop composite with some random photos that we're going to take in class. So let's get started. Before we really do anything, we need to go into Photoshop is where we want to start. And we're going to go to File, New, or if you're on this screen, you can just click on the Create New button, either way. Then this box will pop up right here. First things first, check to make sure this right here is on inches. Very important that that's on inches before we do anything else. Then we're going to put 8 for the width, 10 for the height, and 300 for the resolution. And just make sure Artboards is not checked and the background contents is set to white, and click on Create. All right, before we do anything, let's save this. So we'll do a little file, save as. Now I'm recording this video at home. I don't have access to the photo drive, but you of course would go into this PC and pick the photo drive and save this in your period. Save it in your folder, in a folder called Composite 1. I'm going to do that, but I'm just going to do it somewhere on my desktop or something, since again I don't have access to the O drive. So let's pick it back up after I get saved. All right, now that this is saved, we can kind of put this away for a little bit, and let's jump over to Lightroom. First thing we need to do in Lightroom is add the photos that we're going to be working with, and I've pre-taken some photos for us to play around with here. So let's go ahead and click on our Import Photos button here in the top left-hand corner. And again, for you, this folder right here will be in your period folder in the O drive. For me, it's just on my desktop, but you're looking for a folder in O drive, period, whatever, called PS Composite 1. And I always think that the easiest way to import photos in Lightroom is to click on the folder and then click on Choose Folder right here. And that brings this up, and make sure they're all selected. If not, go ahead and check the box right here that says Select All. And I always like to add my photos to an album. So I'm going to click on this and choose New. And I'm going to go ahead and call this Composite 1. And I've actually already created this album, so I'm not actually going to do it. But if I was doing this for real, I'll just give this a new name. I'll do Composite 1A. And then I'll go ahead and click on Add 7 Photos to add those into Lightroom. Okay, so here are my 7 photos in Lightroom, and what I want to do is go through it. I'm going to edit these up. I'm going to try to create as much contrast as I can between the subject and the background to make it as easy as possible for Photoshop to cut out the background. So let's start with this first one of the softball, and I'll just double click on that to bring it here to my editing panel, and I'll click on this to bring out my editing tools. And what I'm going to do is just play around with these few of these sliders. Again, my goal being to create as much contrast as possible between the ball and the background. So I'm mostly going to play around with the whites. I'm going to bring up the white slider, and that's really going to whiten up that background. Probably also going to lighten up the shadows to try to get rid of that dark spot right there as much as possible. And probably a little exposure and some contrast just to kind of make the whole thing a little more contrasty. And you can see that really helped separate the ball from the white piece of paper. There's before and there's after, and I think that really makes a nice difference. So go ahead and do that on all 7 of the photos, and we'll pick this video back up after we've done that. Okay, so we've got all our photos edited. Let's get one of them opened up in Photoshop. Let's start with the softball. It's the easiest one. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to right click and choose Edit in Photoshop, or you could also just press Control E on your keyboard, and that will pop it open in Photoshop. Okay, so here's our photo in Photoshop. We're going to go ahead and grab the Quick Selection tool. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th tool down on the toolbar right here. Its keyboard shortcut is W. And the cool thing about the Quick Selection tool is that you can just start by pressing Select Subject, and Photoshop is getting better and better at just identifying and selecting your subject for you. And you can see with this softball, it's going to do a really great job. It really gave us a good selection here, but we can make this even a little bit better by clicking on this Select and Mask button. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and let's kind of go through what we're seeing here. We're not going to worry about any of these over here yet because they're not going to be that helpful yet. But we are going to start right here at the top. Let's talk about views. These are all the different ways we can see how our selection is progressing. And so I actually prefer on black and on white. They're the 2 I use the most. I feel like they give me the best view of what my selection looks like. I'm going to go ahead and choose on white for this one, and then I'm going to crank this opacity up to 100%. One really annoying bug in Photoshop is you can see I've just used this slider to raise the opacity, and this number 100 is staying highlighted in blue. As long as that blue is highlighted, if I come out here and try to zoom in by rolling my scroll wheel, you see how it's not working? It's because Photoshop thinks that I'm wanting to make changes here. You have to press the Escape key on your keyboard. And see how that made that go away? And now, when I hold down Alt and roll my scroll wheel to zoom in and zoom out, now it will let me zoom in and zoom out. You can see if that's active like that, I cannot zoom in and zoom out, and it's really annoying So you got to get that to go away by pressing escape. Now we can zoom in and zoom out with our scroll wheel. So here we go. Let's talk about some of these sliders. I always like to do at least a little bit of radius, somewhere between 2 and 4. It just kind of helps Photoshop know that I want it to analyze a little bit more than just the ball, that I want it to look outside the ball a little bit as far as where it should be detecting the edge. And this is a very smooth ball, so smooth is going to be a good adjustment to make on this one. Let me zoom in, which again I can't do because that blue is highlighted, so I'll press escape, and now I'm going to zoom in on this ball. So let me get in real close here so you can see this edge right here, and you can see it's actually a pretty rough, bumpy edge. Watch what happens as I crank this smooth up all the way to 100. It takes a second for it to show up, but watch this edge right here, and there it is. See how that's smoothed out real nicely? You can't use smooth on everything. If you want something to have a rough texture, you obviously wouldn't use smooth, but you can see I can go from that pretty rough texture right there to a pretty smooth one by cranking the smooth up to 100. And because this is such a smooth ball, that's not a bad choice, although we don't need to go that high. I think somewhere around 50 is just fine. We're not going to use any feather in this situation because feather will soften the edge, and we don't want that. And I don't really use contrast unless I'm using feather. But I am going to shift the edge in, and let me zoom out so you can kind of see what that does here. Press escape on my keyboard, hold down, or roll my scroll wheel to zoom out. And here we go. And now I'm going to do the shift edge. Watch when I drag this all the way to the left. Give it a second. You'll see the ball's going to get just a touch smaller. That brought my whole selection in a little bit. And then shift edge, bringing it all the way out, is going to make my selection a little bit bigger. And again, it takes a second to show up. I usually will do minus 15 to 20 or so just to tighten up my selection a little bit. And this is a really good selection. This is a nice, clean selection of this ball. I'm really happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. I feel good about everything here. I am going to expand my output settings by clicking on this little symbol right here. And I want to output to a layer mask. And then we're going to end up using these settings for most of what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and check this box right here that says remember settings and press OK. Now we don't need it on this one, but the cool thing is that this came out with a layer mask, which means I could come in and paint with black or white on my layer mask and make some changes to the ball. I'm not going to because I ended up with a great selection. So we're going to leave this one as is, and we're going to grab the move tool right here on the toolbar, very top tool. Keyboard shortcut is V. I'm going to click on this and drag it up to my other tab here, my practice one. Hold it there for a second and then drag it down and let it go. This box right here is going to pop up. You're going to go ahead and click on Do Not Show Again and click on Yes. And the ball will show up, and we have it in this canvas, and we are good to. All right, let's do some quick saving. Let's update our saved file here by just doing a quick file save. And if we see this, we just want to click on Don't Show Again and press OK. And then let's come to this other file, and let's go ahead and save this one too. So I'll go to File, Save on this one. And the cool thing is this is going to save right back into Lightroom because it came from Lightroom. So you can see I'm going to close this. I'm going to jump back to Lightroom, and you can see it's importing from Photoshop. So it's bringing that file that I just saved back into Lightroom. And you can see now if I look at the ball, there's this little number 2, which means there are 2 photos in the stack, it's called. And if I double click on the 2, here's my original photo of the ball, and here's the one where I cut out the background. So I've got both of these now, and Lightroom is keeping them organized for me, which is kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and click on this X to close that. And let's go to our next image, which is the image of the pen. And this, in my opinion, is one of the hardest ones. So if you can do this one, you can do any of them. So we'll do this one together, and then we will, I'll let you do the rest on your own. So again, right click on this one, choose Edit in Photoshop or Control E on your keyboard. Either way, it's going to pop that open in Photoshop. Just be patient and let it happen. Don't press Control E 500 times. Trying to get it to open in Photoshop, or it will just open 500 times, as we learned the other day. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my quick selection tool, again, keyboard shortcut W. I'm going to hit Select Subject, and you can see Photoshop's going to do a fairly good job, but it's going to have a hard time with that shadow, and it's going to also include the shadow in my selection, which is a bummer. So the good news is the quick selection tool is a lot more than just the Select Subject button. We can use it for cleaning up our edges as well. So before we start, let's again make sure we're on the quick selection tool, and then make sure you're on the plus sign up here because this is going to be a more versatile way to work with. Just trust me on this one. So you'll notice by default, my cursor has a plus sign in the middle of it. Well, we don't want to plus because the plus sign will add to the selection, meaning if I start clicking and dragging, you can see I'm making my selection bigger. And that's not what I want. I actually want to make my selection smaller because it's too big. So what I want to do is deselect from my. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to start deselecting my selection by just clicking and dragging over it. But here's a secret that no one will tell you except for your favorite photography teacher, Mr. Johnson. And it's this: you cannot at any point ever have your circle be touching both the background and the pen at the same time. What I mean by that is it's perfectly fine to click and drag here to deselect. And what will happen is eventually it will deselect too much. And you can see that just happened right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let go of Alt and I'm going to start selecting now. And again, it's very, very important that as I'm doing this, that my cursor, my circle, my brush, whatever you want to call it, that it never is touching both the pen and the background at the same time. And let me show you why that is. You can see I'm cruising along here and things are going great. I'm getting a very, very straight line right here along this edge. Photoshop is learning what edge I want it to select. As soon as I come out and intentionally include some of the paper, like I just did right there, it gets really, really hard to deselect that. You can see, let me zoom in on this, and now I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to try and deselect this. And you can see Photoshop is like fighting me on this. It's like saying, hey man, you clicked on this. Are you sure you don't want this to be a part of your selection? And no matter how hard I try, I cannot get that nice, clean, crisp, straight line that I had up here. But if I undo all of that and go back to what I had before I intentionally included some of the background, look at how easy it is to get that straight line, as long as I never, ever, ever let my cursor touch the background. See, I let go there, and I've got that nice straight line. I've got a real good selection. So I'm just going to keep going here. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to hold down the Alt key to deselect, and the bottom of this pen, Photoshop just has a really hard time with it. You'll see as I go along, I'm not going to worry about adding back in yet. I'm going to get all the way to the bottom. You see Photoshop is really struggling with this one. It's missing a lot of edges, but that's okay because it's always learning what you want selected and what you don't want selected, which is why it's so important that you never touch parts of the pen that you don't need to. So there you go. You can see I got all the way to the bottom, and look, it missed like the whole bottom half of the pen, but that's okay. I'm just going to make my brush a little bit easier to make life simpler here, or a little bit bigger, sorry, to make life simpler. I'm just going to come and click and drag along the brush here, again, being very, very careful that my circle never, ever touches the paper. And you can see right there, I end up with a pretty solid selection of the highlighter. It took a little more work, and I don't quite have a perfectly straight line right there, but I'm going to show you an easy way to fix that later on. And if you want to go in and take the time to get that middle part right there out, you can. Certainly don't have to. So let's go into selected mask real quickly. Again, this is a very smooth pen, so smooth is going to work out really good for us here. I might even add a little bit more than I used on the softball. I'll keep the radius about the same and the shift edge about the same, and I am going to output to a layer mask. So really the only thing I'm changing here is adding a little bit more smooth, and that's it. So then I'll just come down here and press OK again. And you can see that popped out. And again, I've got a layer mask, which is actually kind of cool because remember, painting with black makes things disappear. Painting with white makes things reappear. And what I'd like to do is make the parts of the pen that are gone reappear. So what I'm going to do is click on my layer mask, grab my brush tool, set my foreground color to white, and then make sure I'm using a very hard edge brush, somewhere between 90 and let's just go 100. Then I need to make my size a little bit bigger. Even that's not quite big enough. Right bracket key on the keyboard will make it bigger. What I'm going to do is using a white brush, I'm going to come just to the inside of the pen. I'm going to click, and I'm going to go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to shift click. You can see that made a perfectly straight line that brought back all those weird bumps right there. So let me show you that one more time. Click, and then let go of the mouse. Don't hold that button down. And then go down to the bottom and shift click. And that gets you that nice straight line. And you see we've got a really nice selection of the highlighter here. Switch to my move tool, drag this over into my other canvas. Go ahead and just drop that in there and leave it in there for now. Go ahead and do a quick file save here. Let that finish up, and then a file save here. And we're done with this one. We can close it. That's it, guys. If you can do the pen, you can do all of the rest of these. The pen is the hardest one. So go ahead and go through and edit all 7 of these. And once you have all 7 in your canvas, into this canvas, we'll fire up the video and we'll finish this bad boy. All right, I've got everything in my canvas here. You can see I have 7 layers in my layers panel. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna kind of play around and try to create a little scene here. And there's no right or wrong thing to do here. You can do whatever you want. I'm just gonna give you a couple of tips. One is probably work just 1 layer at a time. It's kind of confusing with all 7 layers turned on. So you can see if I come over here, I can click and drag over these eyeballs. And I can turn all these layers on or off. So I'm gonna go ahead and just click on my softball layer. Make sure not only is your layer turned on, but that your layer is selected and clicked on. And I'll do a little Control-T to start off. And you may need to zoom out so you can see all 4 corners. And let's make this smaller. And remember, you can shrink things down, you can rotate them, you can make them bigger. One cool little keyboard shortcut is to hold down Alt while you're clicking and dragging, and that resizes all 4 corners at the same time. You can see if I don't hold down Alt, it only does this 1 corner, but Alt does all 4 corners there together like that. So maybe I'll make that one smaller and move it up here in the corner like it's the sun. And then maybe I'll turn the pen on now, and again, Control-T, and not only can you resize it, but you also can, let me shrink this down a little bit, and you can rotate these by putting your cursor outside of it and moving it straight up and down or rotating it like this, and then resizing it and kind of do whatever you want. Maybe make a little pathway there. And then another real cool shortcut is if you're on the Move tool, if you hold down the Alt key, see how my cursor changed? I can now click and drag and I can duplicate things. So maybe I want to make this whole ground green like that. And just like that, I've got a green ground. And all I was doing again there was holding down Alt and clicking and dragging to kind of create that look. And look at my layers panel now. I got a whole ton of layers over here that are markers. That's fine. And let's go to the next layer, and I'll click on this one to turn it on, and then click on it to select it. Control-T this layer, and again, maybe I'll rotate it and move it around and do whatever I want. And then just one last thing I want to show you is of course, the importance of the order of your layers over here. You can see right now this memory card is sitting on top of these, but maybe I want it to look like a slide, so I want this bottom half to disappear. Well, if I grab this layer 3 and I move it underneath all these layer 2 copies, this photo will go behind all of those. And now it kind of looks like it's in the ground. So playing around with your layer order is a good way to kind of get different looks and effects on things. So I'm not really going to show you what I want you to make. I want you just to be crazy and kind of experiment with this and see if you can't create some kind of a scene that uses all 7 of the objects. And be creative with this and see what you can't come up with. And we'll probably do some extra credit for the most creative creations that you get. When you're done, of course, we'll do a little file save and save it as a PSD, of course. But we'll also do a little file save as and save it in that same folder, in that composite one, as a JPEG. And we could do a couple of different things with this JPEG. If there's a group, which there will be, I don't believe it exists yet, but there will be one. That is the JPEG you could upload and put in the group on Flickr. And then if we wanted to import that photo into Lightroom, we'll just go back to Lightroom, and we'll probably still just use that Composite 1 folder. And I'm going to click on the Add Photos button, and I'm going to find that JPEG that I just exported. Here it is right here in my Composite 1 folder, and I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to import that into Lightroom, making sure it goes into my Composite 1 folder, and click on that. And now I've added that to my album, and to bring the whole album back, just click on this and choose the Composite 1 album. And I want to turn this in, so I'll click on just this photo. I don't want to turn in all these other stuff. So again, just this photo. Click on the Share and Invite button up here in the top right-hand corner. And as always, we will change this right here from invite only to anyone can view. And then we'll go into the settings and to make sure show metadata is turned on. We'll copy the link here on this clipboard and hit done, and then we will paste that link into Canvas, and we will have completed the assignment.